You're listening to Finding Your Genius Zone with Dirk Nevelle. With the help of successful individuals across industries, Dirk breaks down the unknown parts of every vocation while highlighting the importance of finding a career where you can leverage your natural skills, passions, and interests. Now here's your host, Dirk Nevelle.
Hey everybody, this is Dirk Nevelle. Welcome to my podcast. On with me today is Mike Mora. Mike, welcome.
Happy to be here.
So a quick intro on Mike. I've had this kind of similar intro with a couple guests that I've had. So when I was younger, I was part of the ski crew, and you're at that age where you look up to these guys, and Mike was one of those guys who was part of this group of some of the best skiers around, but just super, super cool, super nice. There's an age difference between him and I, but he was just one nice, gentle guy. And I've always, looked up to him. And it was years later, life goes on. And I was sitting, I think, in a library at University of Washington where I went to school. And I think you came in the coffee shop. And I don't know if you were, studying for your architecture degree or not, but then I saw you, but just one of those guys I haven't seen in a while. And so this is exciting for me, especially based on him being an architect, because that's a career that personally I've always thought about for myself, because I really like I like designing, and I've done a lot for my personal use. So I'm curious to get into it with you, Mike. So what I'll do is let you kind of articulate, if you are sitting down having coffee and somebody sits next to you and asks you what you do, how would you answer that?
Well, I'm kind of your classic architect. We design buildings. I've been doing it now for almost 30 years. I actually didn't study it as an undergraduate student. I got my master's degree in architecture. I grew up intending to be an architect from the time I was a little kid, heavily influenced by an uncle who's actually still practicing down in Los Angeles, well into his 80s. I got a master's degree in architecture at the University of Washington, and I've been practicing ever since. And I am one of two owners of a firm here in Seattle called Heliotrope Architects. And we are currently about 12 people in all. And we focus on high-end custom residential work and commercial work. Most of our commercial work is sort of in the hospitality realm, restaurants, retail, hotels, that sort of stuff, with some other types of ground up commercial projects mixed in, smaller scale urban infill kind of buildings that you might find in Wallingford, those kinds of neighborhoods.
Yeah, I've seen your stuff. I mean, it's really cool. So I didn't mean to interrupt you. So you're both on the residential and the commercial side? Yeah,
we're about 50-50, which has been very beneficial for us through some of the economic and sort of global pandemic turmoil that's happened really through the course of our practice. When the recession hit back in 2008, when COVID hit, the fact that we had a certain level of diversity to the types of projects that we did between residential and commercial helped us survive basically through those. The mortgage crisis was an event that dried up the residential work, and we survived on our commercial projects. And COVID was an event that dried up the commercial projects, obviously restaurants and whatnot. We were doing a massive project out at the new REI complex in the Spring District in the Bellevue neighborhood out near where we went to school.
Yep.
That we were in the middle of design. It was we had 4 of our people staffed on it, and that just shut down 2 weeks into COVID. And so we were, like everyone, concerned for a bit, but the residential work just took off. People looking for sanctuary and refuge. We do a lot of work up in the San Juan Islands, and we got a bunch of projects up there. A big residential complex just up above Cle Elum, project in New Zealand. And so the diversity of our commissions, of the project types that we take on, have helped us through some of the economic turmoil.
Yeah. There's so many questions that are popping in my head just listening to you. Before I get into the job and kind of the reason people are tuning in, I'm curious, like you as a kid growing up, was it Cherry Crest, Hayek, Interlake?
Yep.
And you got a dad, you had a older brother that, professional football coach, college coach, a younger brother. Like, why architect? I'm just curious. Like, what was it about architecture? Was it just merely your relationship with your uncle at a young age, and you just gravitated towards that?
Yeah, certainly that. My uncle Ed Niles. He's actually a very well-regarded Los Angeles architect, and he's worth looking up if you're interested in West Coast architecture.
Yeah.
He designed the house that Johnny Carson and his wife lived in, where Johnny died, and did some projects for him late in Johnny's life. He designed the house next door that Sean Penn and Madonna got married at in Malibu. He worked for and with some of the great mid-century West Coast architects, very famous ones, Craig Elwood, et cetera. Carl Maston, who's not a recognizable name, but was an important figure back then in the California, kind of the modern era of 50s California style. So he was a big influence. He's a great guy. We'd go out to these job sites, houses under construction around Southern California, and there were always these crazy houses. His stuff is very sort of technical and science fiction inspired. And so I love that. And that was definitely an inspiration for me, no doubt. But I like to draw. I liked space and environment. I was interested in the built world. I was the kind of guy that would rearrange my collection of Miami Dolphins posters, every couple of months. And so I was always interested in sort of space and an environment and kind of the psychological, emotional effect it had on a person, this sort of being in certain types of spaces where they were sad spaces, and they would affect me, and other types of spaces that were positive and inspiring and energizing and all that. And I've kind of always been a little bit attuned to that my whole life, I think. I mean, not really conscious of that when I was a kid, but I think that's been a pretty common thread in my kind of my psyche, my consciousness through most of my life. I'm very much a believer that we are very much influenced and a product of our environment.
I hear you. It's interesting. I'm curious what Miami Dolphin players you had on your wall, by the way.
I can name them.
Marino, Zonka?
No. Yeah. So this was the undefeated season.
Okay.
Dolphins. Bob Greasy, Nick Bonicatti, Paul Warfield, Jake Scott, Garo Yepremian, Larry Zonka, Jim Kick, Paul Warfield. I might have already said him. Yeah, I think I had all of them. I was a big Dolphins fan.
So you still had the football gene inside you.
I would have, had I been bigger and faster.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have kept playing, post high school, very much so.
Yeah, me too. I thought I was going to go. My brother is like 6'5". My dad played at Florida State. I have a family, and I was probably the best out of them all, but I just didn't grow. And I had a couple of head injuries, and I'm pretty glad I ended my career because I went to UW and remember watching those guys. And I think it wouldn't have ended well for me. I didn't, it's just a different level. So you're growing up. So you always had this creative side. Was there just kind of the voices in your head? Was there pressure from family, or was it very supportive? Like you kind of knew what you wanted to do from an early age. So there was no pressure.
No, very, very supportive family. My mom and dad both.
Cool.
And they, my dad became a head coach and started making better money in 1983, I think, 84. And so my grandfather actually helped fund my initial year or two of college. And so my parents paid my way through college, which was fantastic. I worked, but I wasn't having to rely on that work to stay in school, to fund school. They they encouraged me to, I started school. I actually started school at the University of Colorado, and I lasted one semester. And I was in the architecture prerequisite program. And I got homesick. And I came back to Seattle, and I skied that winter, and I transferred to the University of Washington that next fall, what would have been my sophomore year. Well, I was still a freshman credit-wise. And I actually met my wife that fall. So good decision there. And I sort of tentatively started pursuing architecture in terms of taking the prerequisite courses. But for some reason, I got sidetracked. Well, I got very interested in this program, a recently renamed program back then, the Henry Jackson School of International Studies.
I was in that.
So that was when I got my degree.
That was my major too.
Yeah. So it was very much the hot thing right then. Scoop Jackson had passed away, and the school had inherited a bunch of money from his campaign fund or something like that, and he became the namesake of the program, and I was very intrigued and interested, and while I always knew I wanted to be an architect, in my next life when I come back, I want to be a foreign service officer or a diplomat, or maybe just a spy.
I love it. I struggled in that. I wasn't the smartest guy in the world, and I just remember times I was even crying, like I was barely. I mean, a lot of smart dudes, and I was like, "What the hell am I in this for?" Like, I thought I wanted to be an ambassador or a diplomat like you, and it's interesting that you and I were both in that. But I was impressed with how many of the foreigners knew more about my country than I did, like the Canadians, a lot of smart people in that group for sure.
Yeah. So that's what I got my bachelor's degree in, and I'm very happy that I did. I'm proud of that. That I studied that, and it was a lesson learned that I've imparted on younger architects or young people interested in studying architecture since. I graduated. My wife, then girlfriend at the time, and I worked for a year, saved up our money, bought a Eurail pass, went to Europe, and rode the trains around Western Europe for 3 months. And it was in Italy. I remember the moment on a train looking out the window when I looked at her and I said, I think I need to go back and study architecture. I think that's still my calling. And my dad had told me when I graduated from this School of International Studies program, we were talking about law school. And he was like, hey, if you want to go to law school, I will absolutely support you in that. And so that was kind of what I was thinking. I got to Italy, started hanging out in that fantastic place, certainly from an architectural standpoint, and decided to go back to my original calling. So I got into the graduate program at the University of Washington, which is a 3-year program if you don't have an undergraduate degree in architecture. If you're studying it with a BA in architecture, it's a 2-year program. So it's sort of this interesting thing. You start, and then next year the 2-year people join you. You get this influx of new people. It was a good program, and then I basically just launched out into my career. I had this great sort of experience happen that was sort of my professional origin story that coincided with the whole grunge music movement, which brought me my first commission while I was doing my thesis. And so that's how I entered the professional field of architecture.
It's interesting because, like, if you're listening right now, you mentioned you play on both sides of the fence, commercial, residential. Is there a third side or a fourth side, or are those the two?
No, there's public work.
Okay.
Yeah, so public libraries, courthouses, and then this is, I guess, probably in the commercial realm, but there's a whole medical category of design work, which is highly specialized.
Okay.
But public and residential and commercial
okay
probably be the three majors. And we really don't pursue any public work, not because we're not interested in it, but Seattle has a group of architects that are very, very good at it. And you really just can't get your foot in the door. And maybe for good reason. The fact that they're doing it and doing it so successfully is great for the community. So we did a little library edition a long time ago. We probably did one or two other things, something for the Parks Department, but we just realized that it was too much of an uphill battle.
Yeah, I get it. What about landscape architecture? Is that part of or is that a different animal altogether?
It's a different animal. So we will collaborate with landscape architects on projects quite often.
Okay.
We design the areas around buildings quite a bit. So paved areas, site walls, water elements, swimming pools, that kind of stuff. We're not plant guys. So, but landscape architects will do plant layout, plant selection, all that, but they also will do swimming pools and patios and pathways and all that stuff. It really just depends. Depends on the project, depends on the landscape architect.
I just finished a book called, I think it's The Devil in the White City, and they go deep into the Chicago World Trade Fair back in the day with the landscape guys and the architectural building guy. And it's really interesting. You might, if you haven't read it, you might enjoy that.
I know the book, I haven't.
Yeah, it's really good. So someone's coming out, I guess, and they're thinking like, I like architecture, I like design, I'm creative, I like, is there a process for somebody that's wanting to get in, start their career? Like, do they just jump in one and or are there companies that might have all of them and then you kind of just rotate every 6 months into a different, like, how does someone determine which one of these is maybe more in alignment with who they are? Well,
I mean, first off, to be an architect is you're a state licensed, it's a state licensed profession, right? Like being a doctor or a lawyer. So you don't get to call yourself an architect per se until you're actually licensed as such. And that requires certain things that you have to, a series of hoops that you need to jump through. Typically you need to have an architecture degree. Now you can circumvent that if you just work in the profession long enough, but the normal path for the vast majority of architects is that you go to school and you study architecture and you get a Bachelor of Arts or a master's in architecture. And so then you go out and you get a job, and to be an architect, you then have to spend, I think it's still about 2 years under the employment of a licensed architect. So you're just an intern. You've got your degree, but you're not technically an architect. You can't put architect on your business card. You can't say, I'm an architect. You can't market that you're an architect. But you go to work for an architect and you start to collect hours performing different categories of architecture, construction administration, which is what you're doing while the building is under construction, and design and technical stuff, you name it. And then you take your exams, which is I want to say there's probably 8 different categories. I just don't remember. It's been a long time. And when you pass those exams, then you become a licensed architect. You get a stamp, and you can stamp drawings, and so that's sort of the process. Typically is that you're interested in the profession and you go to school and you study it in college. It's not the only way to do it, but that's the most common path.
Got it. Okay. And so getting into the career itself, like, what is it? You talked about like what excites you. I guess my question is, what is it about being an architect that you love so much? Like, what is it? What's the why for you? Is there multiple whys, or is there a couple? Is there one?
Yeah, no, I think there's multiple whys. I really like the puzzle. Just sitting down and solving the puzzle of this complicated object. Even small architectural buildings are complicated, right? I mean, a bathroom remodel or Safeco field, it involves figuring out how to put together hundreds, thousands, millions of pieces so that they perform correctly, that they last, that they don't leak, that they look beautiful, that they do what they're supposed to do. My most common analogy, and it's not a perfect one, is car design, in the sense that buildings, while being obviously completely different from each other, they're both things, objects that can look beautiful and need to perform to a high level of safety and function. So, and you should be able to have your cake and eat it too with both, right? So, if you're going to spend $150,000 on a Porsche 911, it's a great looking object. But you know that you can get in it, that your door is going to open and close 1,000 times, that your radio is going to work. And more importantly, that you're going to press the gas pedal down and you're going to take it up to 120 miles per hour down the freeway, and a cow is going to start crossing the road, and you're going to slam on your brakes, and it's going to do everything that it's supposed to do to be safe for you and everybody around you, right? And then there's performance, gas miles, conditioning, that you're driving through the Phoenix environment in the middle of the day, and you can crank on the air conditioner and be comfortable. You can be driving through the mountains in the winter and turn on the heat and be comfortable. All that kind of stuff. You get the point. Looks and performance both equally matter.
Yeah.
The difference is that Porsche gets to spend a decade developing a new model, creating prototype after prototype, testing it, figuring out what doesn't work, what does work. And finally, when they get to the point that they feel like they've got this thing perfected or close to perfected, then they build a massive factory, an assembly line, and then they just start cranking out thousands of these already figured out, perfected objects. On the other hand, when we design custom buildings, each building is also the prototype. So we only get one shot to get it right, or as right as possible. And so that's one of the real challenges to what we do. It's just, you get one shot. You learn lessons through each successive projects. There's mistakes that you make that you only make once, but there's a lot of challenges that you're confronted with where they're hard to, each new project re-challenges you. And there's no guarantee that because you made the mistake last time, that you might not make the mistake again this time. So that, it comes with, there's a lot of risk and anxiety. You're responsible for a lot of money that your clients are investing into these projects. It's for them, it's whether it's a commercial project or whether it's their home, the kind of the psychological and emotional, financial costs and benefits are of course different. But and we as architects, you try to learn to carry the burden of their anxiety and risk as lightly as you can, responsibly. Like you have to bear that burden and make sure that it's nothing compared to being somebody's brain surgeon about to operate on their tumor, but there is some stress and anxiety that comes with the responsibility, no doubt.
What happens when you're creative, you're experienced, you're credible, but when there's a difference of opinion, like the people that are hiring you for a project and you're getting into it, and is it often where you reach a crossroads and you have to bend the knee, or so you kind of, there is the politics in your industry that you might have a different, okay. So you have still, okay.
Oh yeah, for sure. Again, one of the lessons learned for me over the last few years, particularly for some reason, it just started to really hit home, is that when you get commissioned to design a building, your assignment, the creative assignment is figuring out what this building is going to be, but also designing the relationship between you and this particular client, who is always uniquely different from the other clients you have had, right? Everybody has different values and expectations. They see the world differently. They have different communication styles. They hear things differently, right? Their filters are unique, and they have different tastes, right? I'll have a meeting in the morning where a client will say, "Who in their right mind would ever use marble? I hate marble. It's the dumbest thing in the world. And anybody who would ever consider using it is just an idiot." And then 2 hours later, you have a meeting with somebody who says, "Oh my God, I love marble. It's beautiful. I mean, it's the history, Greece. I love the wear and tear of it. I love the fact that my wine soaks into it and leaves that history, of my life." And so you have to be creative and nimble and flexible and not overly dogmatic about how you construct these relationships with these clients who are your lifeblood, right? I mean, they're your, we're service providers. They're the ones that are paying us, and they're the ones that are recommending us to their friends or colleagues. And so it's vitally important. It doesn't always go successfully for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes you feel like you've done everything right, and it's still wrong.
Yeah,
and it's just a difference of opinion. And sometimes you just overstretch and you make mistakes.
Who are these people, though? I'm curious. Like, if someone's listening, like, who is the decision maker? Like, I guess if you're doing residential, is this a homeowner? And if it's a commercial, is it like a marketing agency that you're answering to? Like, or is it the actual person who's the developer or the owner? Like, who are you actually having to convince?
Yeah. So with residential, it's the owner, the homeowner, the married couple, the bachelor, the young woman, the widow, but they're the client. Sometimes this is more the case with high net worth people. There will be an owner's rep that is sort of your liaison through to the client that you're dealing with, but virtually most of the time you're engaging directly with the homeowner, the people that have contacted you and hired you, who are going to be living in these spaces. And you really kind of have to have that connection with them, because you're having pretty intimate conversations about how they will live in this thing you are making together. And it's very collaborative, frankly. I mean, some clients are a little bit more hands-off and some are more hands-on, but in virtually every case, it is a collaboration. It is a back and forth and a negotiation and a compromise. And so you're trying to learn how to, at the same time that you're trying to design this building, you're also designing this framework by which you get them the best thing that you think that they're asking you for, or better still, that and clients will very much sometimes make decisions where you feel like they are, to repeat something I said earlier, they are cutting off their nose to spite their own face, that they're working against their own best interests. Usually that involves money, right? And so it's a real, you're really trying to thread a needle between being responsible and accountable to budget and schedule, and then giving them something great, that they really love. And clients often don't always have a good perspective on that alignment problem, where they will be very adamant about what their budget is, and then they will be very adamant about what their design expectations are. And there can be a real lack of alignment between those. And that can be a delicate conversation to have sometimes. It'd be like, you saying that you want to spend a Volkswagen Passat amount of money on a Mercedes S-Class car. And when the object doesn't exist yet, there's a communication challenge sometimes in sort of navigating through that kind of lack of understanding of what buys what.
Yeah, so, I get it. Yeah. You mentioned money, and I'm certainly not asking you anything personally about like compensation as an architect. You have your own firm. Like if somebody's curious, like, they got to pay the bills and they got to make a living. Are you paid a commission? Like, how does it work typically when you do a project? And I'm guessing projects can last, and another question I have is like, how long typically are projects? Maybe, the average a year to 4 years to 5 years, and do you get paid up front? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah. So we get a fee that's negotiated right at the beginning, and then we're paid. We bill out monthly, almost always. Sometimes we might stall a few months depending on how much work is getting done, the cadence or the pace of the project. But there are different ways to structure your fee. The most straightforward one is just time and expense, right? You just bill out at an hourly rate, and but most clients don't just say, "Okay, great, bill us at an hourly rate, go." They want to know what the likely ultimate tally is going to be, and so we have to have a conversation about what they can expect to spend for a project that they're describing wanting. Okay. If we're just going hourly.
Got it.
But we can't guarantee. But when we do that, we can't guarantee. We can't say it's going to end up being $100,000 in fee, period, because you just don't know what lies ahead when you start these projects.
Would you say, I know it depends on the market, but as far as like the mix, like commercial, residential, would you say like you have 10 projects going on simultaneously, or 5 or 2, or what's
well
typical?
In the office we probably have about 20. Yeah. So in the way we structure it in our office, my partner and I decided when we first formed 20 something years ago that we were going to be almost like a kind of a medical practice where we each had our respective clients, and we have a great working relationship, a great partnership, but we actually don't work on projects together. Either he's in charge of his jobs or I'm in charge of my jobs. And we found that was a much more tenable way to run a practice where so much of what you're doing is highly subjective and easily heading towards dispute and disagreement. I say red, you say green. What's the right answer? There really isn't a right answer, right? It's kind of subjective and arbitrary. And we realized that our practice was going to survive more likely if we siloed ourselves and we interact all the time for all kinds of reasons. Obviously, just for running the practice in general terms, but also talking through what each of us are going through with projects or clients or consultants. We have our staff that bounces back and forth between the two of us. So he doesn't have his group and I don't have my group. We very much are about making sure that everybody's working with everybody else on all different types of projects all the time. But we also realize that for clients, like if we were doing a project with you, that it's really important that you know kind of where the buck stops, what person, that if I'm your principal for the project we're doing for you, you know that if there's a problem, that there's one final person that you know you can turn to and say, hey, we're having issues. It also means that if something needs to happen on the project, we don't get into scenarios where Joe wakes up in the middle of the night and goes, oh man, we forgot about that. Mike's probably got it. And I wake up and think the same thing, but I think Joe's probably got it. And then nobody's got it. I know that if it's my job, that I'm it's all on me, right?
Yeah, I get it. You said something about sometimes it doesn't go well. And in my limited knowledge of architecture, I was trying to understand that a little bit. Because like when you do a sketch, you kind of have a visual, you buy off, you kind of have an idea what it's going to look like. So I'm assuming the design isn't a surprise because you've designed it. You know what it's going to look like beforehand. Were you referring to like the functionality of how it works? Like what doesn't go well? Because it seems like you know what you're getting once you sketch it up and show the client. I guess I was a little confused on that.
Well, it can be all kinds of things, and it can be design stuff as well, because a drawing, even a 3D model in the computer, is very much an abstraction, right? And size of rooms can be a thing. Relationship of rooms sometimes, and we are very thorough about vetting all of our decisions with our clients. We are very service heavy. Like there's a lot of meetings and a lot of discussions.
Okay.
And so the client is seeing everything, and they're usually, if you're designing a $5 million house for a young family, they're very engaged. It's rare to have a client who just says, "You figure it out." It can get relentless at times.
What's your preference? Do you like that, or would you rather have someone that's more involved versus someone that says, "I trust you, do your thing"?
Hey, I don't know. I think an engaged client is really helpful, actually. I do. You just want to be in sync and simpatico with each other. And so we've learned over the years, when people call us inquiring about working with us, we have learned to actually ask them specifically, are you familiar with our work? Have you looked at our work? Because it's not always the case that they have. Sometimes their colleague at work just says, "Hey, you should call these guys." And they don't really, they just don't think about it. And they call us and they engage with us. And then we realize that what we're really good at doing is not what they particularly want. And so you want to be aligned, right? You want to make sure you hire the band to your wedding who play the music that you like and that they're good at playing. We're not, most architects have a niche. It might be a wide niche, it might be a narrow niche. But if somebody came to us and said, "Hey, we really like Tudor style. We'd like you to design a Tudor house for us," we would point them to other people more of that style.
I get it.
So our work is more contemporary. And so there's that. And then there's performance. There's like, my example about the car design, right? Things break and they leak and they all kinds of weird things happen. Right. I mean, the unknown problem is just mind-boggling. And sometimes the thing breaks a decade later. Like we have that on one of my favorite projects that we've ever done. My partner was the lead design on, was a house up on Orcas Island. It's probably 15 plus years old now. Really great project. But there was a leak in the roof that is a garden roof that's been leaking forever and was just recently discovered. And so the whole thing is torn out now and getting redone. And so sometimes the problem is happening for years and you don't even know until it presents somewhere in a puddle on the garage floor or something.
No, I get it. Yeah. So people, you might think they're gone forever, but they resurface. I mean, that's one thing. If you're thinking about architecture, it's not like a one-off, see you later. You might see them again 10 years down the road.
Yeah. And the best way to see them 10 years down the road is when they call you to do another project, right? That's the best sign. And we have those. The house we're doing in New Zealand right now is for a couple that we did a house for here in Seattle 10 years ago. and he's from New Zealand, and that's where they want to retire to. They bought this beautiful piece of property down on the South Island, and through the course of COVID, at a very slow pace, we've been chipping away at this great residential project. And so if a client calls you back for that reason, for more work, that's great. But just as often, they might be calling you back even 10 years down the road because something went wrong.
Got it. No, I get that, even in my world. So I'm curious, like your day, like, you're a business owner, but you're also an architect. So sometimes good architects don't make good business owners, right? And vice versa.
Yeah.
So if someone's watching Mike and listening and thinking, oh, this is cool, I'd like to own my own gig and I love architect, but that doesn't necessarily translate for everybody. What I'm trying to get into is like, there's different flavors or there's different skill sets that comprise your firm.
Yeah.
Would you say that, like, is it common that owners of architectural firms are actual practicing architects, or is that typical?
No, I think usually, and I'm not an expert on this, Dirk, but I think from what I can tell, most owners of architecture firms are architects, or at least in big firms, there are architect owners, and then there might be an owner who came through human resources or marketing or business development. So I worked at NBBJ Architects, which is one of the great global firms based out of Seattle. They designed Safeco Field and the Gates Foundation, and they're huge, and they do work all over the world. And most of their partners are architects, but one of them was an interior designer. One of them was a lawyer, right? So, but for a small practice like ours, I think in terms of the realm of architecture that we operate in, the owner is going to be an architect.
Okay, I was just curious.
And then really it's just, it's all over the map in terms of how it goes down in each respective firm. I suspect in our case, Joe and I are design architects. Like, we put pencil to paper. We did this because we don't necessarily want to manage other people or crunch numbers. We want to draw and think through the problems of design, work with clients and contractors and consultants and fabricators. That's our jam. But the second you start hiring people, you gotta be responsible for other aspects of the business. I'm lucky because I partnered up with somebody whose strengths are my weaknesses, and I think probably vice versa. I think Joe's probably a better business person than I am. He cares about numbers in a way that I don't. He's a great architect, but so we work well together from that standpoint. But we both are very much interested in being owners that are still very much doing architecture, right? Thinking through the problems, designing, albeit with our team, right?
Yeah. I'm curious, as we kind of start to wind down, if someone's watching, like, what's your day like? I mean, if you were purely an architect, maybe all your day is design. But as a business owner, like, are you spending 4 hours in creative design, 2 hours in meetings with potential clients and partners? Like, what is the day, the week? Is this a 9 to 5 thing? Do you find yourself working at nights, on weekends? Do you have the ability to leave your work behind and go hang out with your family? Like, I'm kind of curious, like, what the lifestyle, the day is like for somebody who's an owner and a practicing architect.
Yeah, well, good question. And everybody has their own. There's no standard here, of course. I work probably 60 hours a week plus. I work almost every Saturday. I think I probably work about 10 hours a day, but I really like working. My dad was a huge influence on me. My dad worked his ass off. He had a really successful career. My dad was one of those bosses who never left before the people that were working for him left to get an assignment done. which I always had a massive amount of respect for. And I try to emulate that. When I was at NBBJ, the boss is there. You'd be working on a deadline. You knew you're going to be there till 1 o'clock in the morning, and they'd pack up their briefcase at 5 and look at you and say, "Don't work too hard," and chuckle and go home. And you'd be stuck there eating cold pizza, through the night. And I hated that. I didn't respect it. And so we in our office very much try to have a kind of a real team mentality of one for all and all for one. And I think as an owner, it's imperative that you sort of establish the standard in terms of hard work and focus and all of that stuff. But to answer your question about like how my day is spent, I try to have as much of my day spent on thinking through the problems of design as much as possible. But Joe and I are also the ones that have to go out and generate new work. So we're certainly marketing, and then there's just stuff that has to happen in the office. But we try to minimize that and focus on the work, because the best marketing for us is doing good work and providing good service for our clients.
Yeah, I love it. It's interesting with a lot of the guests that are creative, even like a music film score producer I interviewed, you have to have that likability factor, the getting out there and talking to people and doing, the phone calls, a financial advisor. It's like, it's not all fun and games and sitting back and getting creative and drawing. And you actually have to get out there. And so I think it's important because like on one side, you could think, oh, I'm a total introvert. Architecture would be great. I can go in my office, close the door and just get focused. But as a business owner, you have to have those social, personal skills as well to actually get people to trust you and like you and earn the business. So it's something to think about. I do have to ask, is there anything about the career, and I'm not a negative guy, but like, if you had a child that was really interested in getting involved and following in your footsteps, but there's one thing you're like, I want you to know about this, like maybe something like financial stability, control, freedom. I mean, I don't know what those things are, but is there anything about the career that you don't like?
I mean, I'm sure there's little things. I like what I do, and I don't really want to retire. I think you have to certainly be built a certain way to thrive in the profession. This sort of, you got to care, but that goes for any profession, right?
Yep.
Attention is paramount. We talk about that a lot in the office, that you can never let up on sort of a high level of attention to the work that you're doing. And so to be attentive usually requires that you have to care, right? It's hard to be attentive about something that you just don't care about. And so I think there has to be just a kind of an innate interest, passion, natural tendency to want to solve these particular types of problems, right? Like if somebody said to me, Mike, you now have to go have a career as an accountant, I don't know what I would do, right? Because I just don't care. I don't care about that. I don't care about numbers. They go in one ear and out the other. And so I think in terms of finding your profession, obviously a lot of people have just to work to be able to sustain themselves, right? To make some money and live. But if you have the good fortune to find something to be able to do professionally, to get paid for, that you really care about, right? That a lot of times it might drive you crazy. It might stress the crap out of you. It might make you cry, but in the end, there's not really anything else you'd rather be doing, except for maybe being a foreign service officer. That is really important. And we see people come through our office who you suspect maybe don't care, innocently so, right? They just, it's just maybe not really what they should have set out to do. And usually that's reflected in their work. So it's certainly important for us when we're thinking about who comes and joins our practice. What is their kind of and passion's probably the wrong word, but it's sort of the obvious one. But it's that, do they really care about this thing that they're doing?
I love
and
where
that can get you a long way.
I love it because this kind of ties into it's like a race, running a race that you're faking it. It's exhausting. Eventually, if you don't care, it's going to it could translate. I mean, you could be in your zone of excellence and be really good at it. But when you're in your zone of genius, I feel like caring is a good word to describe that. Do you have any advice for a young lady, young man, maybe career change, coming out of school, and they're pretty dead set on architecture? Like anything that I haven't asked that you think is something that you would want them to think about before they commit?
Well, one thing that I tell a lot of young people that are thinking about studying architecture as undergrads, as I say, if you can afford it, both financially and in terms of just the time you have in your life, is you might consider studying something different as an undergrad: philosophy, international relations, business, art, literature, and then maybe go work or travel, and then apply to architecture as a professional degree, a master's degree. For one reason, just because studying architecture as an undergrad, as a 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old, when you're also just trying to have that college experience, can be tough because it's an incredibly demanding educational discipline, and can really put a damper on your college social life. I didn't do that. I didn't have that experience because I studied something different, but I've seen it over and over again. And so, and some of the best architects that I know are ones that maybe studied history or philosophy as undergrads, and then they ended up studying architecture as a professional degree. They were more committed. They were more disciplined. And just spending vast amounts of time in the studio was an easier sacrifice to make when you were 25 or 26 and you kind of had really sort of landed on that this is something that you wanted to do, as opposed to when you're 21 and your frat brothers are all out at the Ram or whatever the local pub is.
Duchess, Roanoke.
Roanoke, right? That's right.
That was one of my best jobs ever.
Yeah. And then the other one would just simply be, if you have the opportunity to work in the construction industry,
right?
That's a great benefit.
Okay. What do you think, again, as we wind this down, what do you think, like, your competition and peers, like, I'm curious, when they talk about you, like, not that they're sitting around talking about you, but what do you think, like, what is why do people come to you? Like, you have a uniqueness, a niche, whatever you want to call it. What would you say, like, your special skill or your special talent is as it relates to architecture? Like, why would somebody go hire Mike Mora for a project versus somebody else who's also pretty good?
Good question. I'm not entirely sure I know the answer.
Okay.
I would hope it's because they see me and they see our firm as a resource that cares, right? And will strive to and work very hard to give them the best possible product and service, really kind of for the best price in a way. Not that we're cheap, but just that you get the most bang for your buck, and that we're there for you. And I guess equally and relatedly, that they find us trustworthy and stimulating and enjoyable to work with, and they like the results of what we put in front of them, and that they come out of it feeling like it was a fulfilling, rewarding experience above and beyond just getting this thing that they move into. That there was an engagement that there was value in the relationship.
Yeah, I get it. It's something that I've struggled with in lending. Your little brother's in the same business is, differentiating yourself. Like, we're all good at what we do. Most of us care. I care a lot. But sometimes in the lending world, it comes down to fee and rate. And it's hard to if I think I have these unique skills. Maybe I'm vulnerable, I'm sensitive, I'm a smart, whatever it is that I am. Yeah. I don't get to use those tools they don't mean much in the world of being a lender. And I guess, do you feel like your personality, I mean, it sounds like it does, but you get to be you, and that's sticky. That means something, right? People not only are paying you for your skill set, but they're also paying you for the trust, the confidence, the likability. I mean, it seems like you kind of have to have both sides of it.
Yeah, I think so. But it's a double-edged coin or double-sided coin. I think one of my weaknesses is probably that I'm not necessarily the hard ass that I sometimes might need to be, right? And I'm aware of that. We try to play the long game, right? Like, one thing that's really important for us, certainly in this community, but probably any community in this profession, is to not burn bridges, right? That relationships are really the coin of the realm to being successful, and that can put you in some challenging positions sometimes between clients and consultants and contractors, and there might be pressure from one side to make a decision that feels rash against one of the other people involved in this triumvirate or whatever it is, right? And you feel like maybe you're being weak because you're trying to just keep everything at bay, and you're not, blowing your gasket, or you're not firing somebody, or you're not, right? You have to sometimes navigate through this minefield of people that are at their most anxious moments. They've spent tons of money. Something's gone wrong. Somebody's not responding fast enough. And maybe the easy inclination is just to blow your lid and quit or fire somebody. And we really talk a lot about how important, particularly with what we do, is just trying to keep an even tone, stay cool, stay calm, stay positive, play the long game. Don't wreck relationships needlessly, because Seattle's a small town, and everybody, no matter how good they are, no matter how professional they are, they have things happen. They have life crises, personal things, business things. People quit. Things go wrong. Pandemics happen, and you have to just stay cool and stay understanding, and know that one of these days it might be you in that situation that needs that, that understanding and that forgiveness and that third chance. And so that's really important.
That's awesome.
Relationships.
I love that. So we have a couple minutes left. I know this is probably a longer answer, so you can make it short, but I have two questions. The first one is, I'm just curious what your 101 is on the future of architecture and how AI is going to change it. I don't know if you ever get into that. I'm fascinated by AI. I'm more on the alarmist spectrum. I think my job, and I think a lot of jobs, are going to be eliminated. Do you feel like AI is a threat to architecture?
I think it could be. Yeah. I haven't given it very much thought at all. Okay. I have read a very little about it. And some of my podcast people are very much interested in the topic. And they're like you. I think, the people that I listen to and want to hear their point of view on are worried about it. But it does seem plausible to me that an AI system can very easily design and document a building, mainly because if you move the client out of the way, the thinking through the problem of putting a building together is tangible, right? It's not abstract, right? There are physical rules that are very kind of just straightforward and logical, right? A wall, a roof, a floor, waterproofing, a plumbing system, electricity. So yeah, I could see it very much having a huge impact for sure.
Yeah. One of my favorite books is The Fountainhead, and I love Howard Rourke, the character in that, who's an architect. And when I think of AI and architecture, like, Howard Rourke, as you may or not know, he did it his way, and his whole take was, it's like the human body. There shouldn't be anything on a building that doesn't serve a purpose. And when I think of AI getting involved in your industry, I almost think it could be like a little bit like Howard Rourke did it in The Fountainhead. And then where the beauty and the art comes in is maybe in the stuff that isn't necessarily functional, that gives it a differentiation or something. So, have you read that book, by the way?
I have, but a long time ago.
Okay.
I really only remember the broad outline of it.
Yeah, Howard Rourke was very different in the architecture world, and he did it his way, or he just walked away. I don't know how successful he'd be in this day and age, but the question I had, I think I know the answer. If architecture was off the table and you had to choose a career, like a dream job, like a lot of people look at your brother and your dad and football coach. I mean, think that would be a dream job. Is there a dream job? Is it a secret agent, diplomat, spy? I mean, is that really, were you joking?
No, I'm not. I actually, if I could start over again and architecture was off the table, I would probably pursue something in that realm. Yeah.
Okay.
Take my undergraduate degree that I've got, go to law school, apply to, I don't know, the Foreign Service, the State Department, diplomacy. Yeah, I find that super fascinating.
Would you say that you would be out and about traveling, you'd be mobile. You're right now in a world that you're stationary probably a lot of the time. Yeah. Very, very different worlds. Like, it's interesting that you tell me that, because I would think, maybe writing music or something where you could kind of hunker down like you do now. And yet you pick a career that is the total opposite.
Well, that's my other dream career, is to be lead guitar in a great rock band, or drummer.
All right. Well, let's start
or Philip Glass. If I could be Philip Glass, that would maybe be it.
I don't think it's too late. I think you and we'll get Merkling House and LeBeau or whatever. We could start a band.
I think, Craig Levine has been playing the guitar. So, yeah.
Yep. I grew up next to Craig. Small world. Hey, Mike, thank you so much. You're awesome. I appreciate it. I hope to bump in you a little more. I think what you provided is really useful, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, it was very much my pleasure. And when I'm down in Bend, I will let you know.
Well, I'm not in Bend.
Oh.
No, your brother's in Bend, right?
I thought you were in Bend too.
No, I moved away. I went to Sun Valley back 6-7 years ago. I took my family and put my kids in school there, and did that for a couple of years. But I live in North Bend.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So no, it's cool. No, I'm up, and we live in we have a farm, and we actually live in a barn. You'd love it. So kind of a different way of living, but it works for us. So,
well, if you find yourself in Seattle or in Ballard, just get a hold of me.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right.